Well, here I think the important thing when understanding Germany is to distinguish exactly what we mean by minimum wage. I suppose I've been talking at the moment about a statutory national minimum wage. So most countries, that's the kind of minimum wage they have. Britain, through most of the 20th century, had a series of sector binding standards. And that's the kind of thing that Germany's doing now. So they're establishing now, they've got 9 sector binding standards. And there aren't many groups actually pushing for a national statutory minimum wage, not even on the trade union side. There are curious examples. For example, the cleaning industry employer body is pushing for a national statutory minimum wage because of the way in which often cleaners are outsourced from one sector into another sector. So the cleaning employer body can actually see the benefits of a national wage floor. But Germany has made a lot of progress in instituting these binding standards through sector collective agreements. However, the push for that wasn't necessarily evidence of or recognition of a rising low-wage share in Germany. It was more because of this external threat of posted workers, which had a direct detrimental effect on wages and conditions in particular sectors, starting in construction in the mid-90s and then moving through other sectors. It's kind of a 10, 15-year-old story in Germany, but it's really accelerated in the last 3 years. The cleaning sector shares a special set of characteristics with other low-wage business services sectors, which is that those companies are often dependent on 1 or 2 large client organizations for their business. Now, when you buy the business from a cleaning company, from a security company, from a catering company, you're paying for the wage costs, the quality, the technologies, and so on. So it's a different business model from having to sell in a kind of a market of thousands of consumers. So as long as the cleaning company is paid a sufficient margin, they're happy to pay higher wages. So there have been very interesting alliances between these business service employers and trade unions. So in the Hungarian security sector, for example, security employers and security trade unions have made an alliance to establish minimum unit costs for services, which build in a supplement to the minimum wage to security workers, which is very interesting. So they're not just trying to have price-led competition in the market. So they recognize that they need to act in concert against the large banks, construction firms, and others who are buying in the services. A similar argument can be made about the living wage as it's been established in many states in America or in London, for example. It's often an alliance among employers and unions working against the client customers. So this is it's an interesting kind of capital labor set of dynamics that you see here, which is different from other sectors like the retail sector, where you often have very high profit margins in large retail chains, and this isn't, there's no filtering down or trickle down to increasing wages there. That's a different set of issues. A kind of perennial question, especially among the American economists who've done a lot of work on living wages, Michael Reich, who's here, and others, that there's no diffusion. And this is really the problem. So you're building a kind of a model and set of policies and practices around a local exchange, and we're not seeing the diffusion. If I give you an example, in Britain, for example, you have this large firm like G4 Security, second largest private sector employer in the world after Walmart, and they will enter into some contractual relations which allow them to pay security workers a decent wage, but the same firm cannot or refuses to spread this kind of wage rate and terms and conditions to all its security workers. So they often get into the problem where you've got the same security worker who will have a changing rate of pay according to which contract and which client organization they're working with. So within our Fairness at Work research group at the moment in Manchester, we're pursuing some of these questions by looking at the supply chain effects of client relations on organizations selling low-wage labor, and trying to understand what are the sets of dynamics, context, institutional constraints and opportunities and so on, which shape the contract between these firms, which then builds in or doesn't build in sufficient cost for wages.